Okay, so shall we start? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from different parts of the world. And of course, as the longest country which celebrates Christmas, it's Merry Christmas from the Philippines. Welcome to another insightful session hosted by Qualitative Research Connect, or QLRC. Today's webinar is entitled The Fireside Chat Approach to Story Gathering in the AOTS Framework, Praxis and Possibilities. Our speaker for today is a Banga postdoctoral and BECHS Africa Fellow and a senior lecturer at the Department of Teacher Education, University of Ghana, Legon. As an African-centered methodologist, African Oral Traditional Storytelling, or AOTS framework, and multidisciplinary researcher in education, her research interests include curriculum studies, curriculum development and implementation, pedagogy, culturally and linguistically responsive education, literacy and English education, indigenous language and research frameworks, African and Ghanaian feminisms, and post-colonial, decolonial studies in education. Let us all welcome Dr. Araba A.Z. Ose Tuto.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gadima. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all for coming in. Do I have permission to share my screen?
Yes.
Go ahead. Okay. So let's see. Next, please. Share with. In a second, trying to figure this technology out. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So thank you for making so much time. As Dr. Darren said, my presentation is titled The Fireside Chat Approach to Story Gathering in the African Oral Traditional Storytelling Framework, Praxis, and Possibilities. And I'm going to begin my presentation with a story, as I am a storyteller. So growing up, for those who come from the African and to some level the Caribbean cultural backgrounds, you may have heard the story of Anansi or Anansi the spider. And today I'm starting my presentation with Anansi and the Pot of Wisdom. This is a story about, so let me tell it as it was told to me. So a long, long time ago, in a land where wisdom was available for all, Odumankuma, which is God, gave wisdom to every single animal in the kingdom. But Anansi came up with the idea that he would go around and collect all the wisdom that everyone else had and put it in one pot. And that when he did that, he would be the sole bearer of wisdom. He will be the only person who has wisdom in the world. So he went around, he would go to his friend, ask a question, they will answer, and then he will put the wisdom in the pot. So he gathered all the wisdom that he could come up with, and he put it in the pot, and then he tied it up. Now, what was he going to do with it? He wanted to hide it so that no one will get access to that wisdom. So that if anybody needs any kind of wisdom or anything answered, they would have to come and look for Anansi. So Anansi decided, well, he was going to dig somewhere and hide. He said, no, someone will find it. And so he decided that he was going to climb the tallest tree in the forest and put that wisdom pot up there. And so he got to the place, he had the pot around his neck, and he was trying to climb the tree, but he was struggling. He would go a few meters and then the pot would shift and therefore he would come back down. He kept doing that for a while. And then one of his sons in Tekuma came walking by and saw the father trying. He stood there, observed the father for a very long time, and then finally reached out to the father and said, you know what, if you turn that pot and you put it behind your back, it will free your belly side to make it easier for you to climb up. And Anansi was just devastated because as far as he was concerned, he had gathered all the knowledge that he could from all of them. So why does his son still have knowledge? And so he, in his anger and his stupidity, trying to get back down to get that knowledge, he drops the pot and the pot broke. And knowledge, again, of course, spread throughout. And so everyone has one of those things. And I would say that this is a deconstruction of the story, though, but it brings us to the kind of conversation we're going to have today. Who determines what knowledge is? Who has the right to knowledge? Who determines which one is accepted and which one is not? Because as far as the story tells us, we all have ways of knowing. We all have ways of understanding ourselves. We have beliefs, we have lives, and therefore it doesn't make sense in all its form to have knowledge or to share knowledge from one perspective or from one pot, as Anansi tried to do. And so you would see if we're within the space of decolonization that scholars have decried and complained and talked about the ways in which our research, our ways of understanding, even people of different cultural backgrounds, are always centered within white imperialist understandings of individuals. Our theories, our ways of engaging, if you go into academia, those are the ways in which we see or understand ourselves. And that raises a problem because if Africa or indigenous people want to conduct research that is relevant to their communities, relevant to the peoples within those spaces, then we have to center our ways of understanding the world, our ways of engaging with nature, our ways of thinking, our spiritualities within the kinds of research and the ways in which we understand our own experiences. And so you'd find that various scholars have pushed and argued for centering African praxis, African ways of thoughts in the research process. And so when I started my PhD and I was interested in looking at African people's experiences, particularly Africans who lived in the US, my focus was to find some ways. Oh, sorry, please give me a second. Okay. So, sorry, I was trying to fix my screen. It looked like it wasn't in the way it was supposed to be. So, so in trying to understand these experiences, I leaned in on what I know best and what my collaborators at the time knew best. That is African oral traditional storytelling. Across Africa, these stories are eminent. They are particularly innate to the African peoples or people of African descent. And so if we're trying to understand them, if we're trying to engage them, why not engage them through this? Because through this space, our language, our culture, our identities, our perspectives, our ways of knowing, our proverbs, and why saying are all embedded in such storytelling spaces. And so I came up with the idea to develop a framework using the African oral traditional storytelling in understanding the experiences of African peoples. And so within this framework, I am pushing back as putting out that African ways of learning or engaging is important and it is ethical, it is a political statement, it is culturally and linguistically and philosophically situated in the ways in which we understand ourselves as a people. So as a focus of way or as an approach to decolonizing the research itself, I use storytelling both as a process of gathering experiences, but also as a process of meaning making. So the storying, it's not just gathering the stories for itself, but the ways in which your collaborators, and I call them collaborators because the people we engage with on this level, at the communal level, are part of the process. They cannot be participants in their own experiences. And so when you're working within the AOTS framework, you are collaborating, you are working together with the community to arrive at a point or to arrive at the answers that you're looking for in the research process. So what does the framework actually look like? So the framework is guided on 4 main levels in terms of its epistemology, in terms of the methodology or the approach that is used, in terms of its analytical tool, and the outcomes or what it seeks to do. So I will do the main highlights here, and then I'll leave room so that when we have the conversation, we can ask questions and we can talk fully about it. But at the epistemic level, what you're saying is that within the framework, you can approach it from the post-colonial perspective or the decolonial perspective within the post-colonial space. We're looking at it from the perspective of those who have been colonized and are, quote unquote, no longer colonized, but then within our ideas, within our academe, are colonized because of the kinds of perspectives, the kinds of theories, the kinds of knowledge that is expressed in those spaces. Then moving into spaces of how do we delink from these colonial authorities? How do we delink from these colonial mentalities again so that decolonizing? We're looking at centering indigenous ways of knowing. We're centering perspectives that are philosophically centered in African culture. We're looking at African languages in the research process and how they be represented even in publication processes, and also basically trying to understand whatever experience we're looking at or searching or researching through African values and African worldviews. And the framework moves through, so how do we gather the stories then, or how do we gather those experiences? We do that through the Fireside chat. Fireside chat is a communal space, and the first picture on my presentation showed that, where a group of people come together, usually by the fireside. They sit and they share stories. In the old time, that was the purpose, to share stories, to share experiences. However, within the framework, we are moving from those storyline, but also sharing stories in the same place, but about people's experiences that are related to our research focus. In terms of our analysis, the storying or the process of storying becomes the analytical view. As we shared the story, or as the story I shared at the beginning of my conversation with you, I did not necessarily go into detail to try to explain, to bring literature from here, or to bring a theory from here to try to explain or extrapolate or try to get you understand it. But within that cultural space, when the story is done, the knowledge is shared, people's perspectives are out. Sometimes this happens even in the songs that are said in response to the telling. It happens sometimes in the call and response that happens during the storytelling process. Sometimes it's even in the dancing that occur. And therefore, for this particular framework, storying is both analysis and quote unquote data and analysis in that sense from what we know in regular research processes. Again, the outcome here for using the African oral traditional storytelling framework is the validation and reclamation of indigenous perspectives, indigenous practices, indigenous worldviews. And so we are in a system where we continue to be colonized, even though we are not being colonized. And colonization has taken a subtle form. For me, I have another paper where I talk about um, the ways in which we term globalization and we are pushing for global citizenship or global citizenry. But when you look at people identifying as global citizens or global citizenry, where my question is, what are we losing in pushing for such perspectives? Whose culture is considered globalized and whose own is left behind in such perspective? So by approaching research from such frameworks, we're saying that our ways of knowing is valid and it's important, and that knowledge, again, is not in one space, but across the various ways in which cultures understand themselves. So within the fireside chat space, what do we do? And from here, I'm sharing, I'm talking about this framework, focusing on a study that I conducted with teachers in senior high schools, looking at their experiences of sexual harassment from students. So the students are who harass their teachers sexually. And in that space, so I will explain the approach within the OATS framework and how I used it in gathering the experiences of the teachers. So the Fireside Chat, as I already explained, is a space where people gather, communities come together and share those experiences for the purpose of this study or for the purpose of the sexual harassment study with the teachers. I gathered you. That's the space where they share their experiences of harassment. And in that space, there is a power dynamics that shift. In our regular research methodological approach, you are the researcher, you come into the space, you, in some ways, and sometimes depending on the researcher, you are the one who holds all the knowledge, you come, you ask questions, and then you get responses. And you guide or you determine what the conversation should be, what kinds of answers you get. But within the OATS framework, because it's a storytelling space, what you do is you share their focus or the conversations you want to have with them. And they take over by sharing their experiences. So that researcher gatherer relationship is more communal, is more leveled than there is no power structure within that kind of space because that power dynamics is removed because we are all at the same level, we are all in the same space trying to share experiences that matter to us. In such spaces as well, it means that the conversations are guided by your collaborators. Yes, you share, you tell them what you're interested in, but the conversations and how they share and who shares and what they share come directly from them. And so the experiences that are shared are collaborative. In the framework, these are the processes that you practically go through in that fireside chat space. First, you need to build relationship and trust. This requires that. So we are not popping up one day in a school environment and saying, I am a researcher as this, and I'm interested in this. And so would you have a conversation with me and record? No. My conversation with the teacher started with, oh, we have students who come here to do teaching practice. I'm coming to say hello. I want to meet the ladies, engage with them, have a conversation with the teachers, and then I head back. The second time I was there in the space having conversations around teaching as a profession. How are we going into? Why did you go into teaching? What are some of the experiences in the school space? And then I would call the my collaborator, my senior collaborator, if I can call her that way, she then brought them in that this is the interest, this is my conversation, this is what I want to talk to them about. And so by the time we get into the conversation on the experiences that they've had in relation to sexual harassment, they know me. We have built that kind of trust. We have built that kind of community for the sharing to take place. And then during the fireside conversation, you allow collaborators to share their experiences. And very soon I'll be talking about how digression impacts the kinds of conversations you have in the storytelling process. Now, because it is storytelling and the setting, the scenes, the facial expressions, the songs or the reactions that come during the storytelling matter to the telling, audio and video recording are very important, particularly the video, because it helps you in the storying and the restoring process to be able to write out the expressions. Ultimately, when you do write out these stories, they are supposed to feel oral. They are supposed to place, so when the person is reading or someone is reading your work, they should feel like they are in the by the fireside chat with you in that space as the people tell the stories. So how are people responding? If someone says, "Oh, is that so?" Or if there's someone breaks into a song, or someone provides a proverb in response to the telling, all of these things have to be worked into the restoring process. Now, the final level here, well, not exactly the final, but a major part of the framework here is the co-meaning making process within the framework. So when these stories are restored and they are written out, we go back in another fireside chat to share these stories with your collaborators. Collaborators look at how you are describing them. They look at how you are expressing your meaning or understanding through your response, either through song, either through poetry, They are looking at how you have even described or transcribed, because of course audios are not always perfect, and how you have transcribed the things they are saying. And they provide feedback. They respond, oh, in this kind of context, I meant this. In this particular experience, this is what it stands out to me. And culturally, this is the point I was trying to make. And this was the background to the knowledge I was trying to give. And so that helps you shape the idea or the perspective that you're conducting the research in. So what within this framework, I have to center that relationship building is very, very important. If you don't build that relationship, it tempers or hampers that communal, so that ultimately the outcome of your research should be something that the community finds useful, something that the community can hold on to and say, this is a part of me. Yes, you have your research, you have your publications, but this is something that I can have for myself as a community, and its impact is felt within that community. So usually when the stories are done and they give feedback and it is finally done, these stories are given back to the collaborators. They have copies of those stories for themselves and maybe for the people that they feel comfortable sharing with. Particularly in the conversation around sexual harassment, I find that the stories that they got back were in telling or in sharing and in getting back were a form of catharsis for them to deal with the trauma and the experiences that they have had as well. What are questions? What is the role of questions within the framework? Questions are, you would not find a lot of questions in this space. The questions will mainly center around your objectives and just a few to allow, or questions that will get your collaborators talking, but not as a consistent, structure of following one question or another. When you introduce the conversation and you introduce what you want to hear, so my first question was to my collaborators, is what do they understand by sexual harassment, and what are some of the experiences they've had concerning sexual harassment? And that left the room, and I basically just sat there and listened. And if something was shared, then my question followed based on the experiences that were actually being shared. And so that then we come to digression. We know how conversations happen. We tend to move away from the topic quite a bit, and that happens even in traditional storytelling spaces, because there might be a related story, may not the main focus of the story that we want to share, but there's a related story. So while you are telling the story, it might remind somebody of another experience that was in there. So for my study, for instance, I ended up having stories about um, sugar daddies and sugar mummies, students having. So sugar daddies are, and I know because of context, sugar daddies are older men who basically have relationships with younger women. And of course, in exchange, they get money. The younger women get money, and their sugar mummies is the opposite, right? Some of the teachers shared experiences about house helps or domestic helps within various homes sexually abusing their children, but that it wasn't the main focus of my experience or my conversation with them. And so the best way around this is to let them share, but make sure to guide them back into the conversation. And sometimes, because this is a communal thing, the collaborators themselves bring themselves back. So in a particular situation, someone was talking about the house girl issue, for instance, and one collaborator said, well, but that is not the experience he's asking for. That's not the experience we are talking about. So let's get back to those experiences. So you have people who are working together with you in the storying and the research process. And I think that, so why is this important? When we are looking at such spaces, another thing that is relevant to the old framework or the old framework space is the issue of language. Language in that space is not restricted. And so in my story or in my recordings, you'd find that collaborators say whatever they want to say in whatever language they want to say. The good thing is that I am blessed to have grown up in a home or in a space or in an environment where I picked up a lot of languages and within the Ghanaian cultural space. And so when you move here, I understand if you move into a different language, if you speak Ewe, if you speak so it was easy for them to bring in. If so something happened and the language within which it happened, that people, collaborators feel comfortable using that language, you let them use the language. And as a way of pushback, sometimes when I write these out for publication, I leave the languages in the native language and I do not translate them into English. And sometimes it's on purpose because I know we want people who are reading to understand, but I also feel that sometimes we should try to make meaning from the context and see, because translations do not always carry out the meaning the way you intend them to be carried out. Again, I think I mentioned this already, so I'm not going to go belabor it, about representing orality within the writing process. So because because the focus or the main aspect of this framework is the concept of orality and making people feel like they were there in the space, you cannot write this as you would, let's say, a novel or any other kind of story. We need to maintain the tactile aspect of the oral process, the feeling, the sound, the touching, the facial, all of that has to be felt and experienced in the writing process. So what exactly does the storying and the restoring process look like? Again, I mentioned that we're going to be using videos and, of course, audio recording. The storying process engages the main ideas, transcribing, of course, what they said, using their own words and their own languages in retelling the stories. We are not editing, we are not revising the exact words as they said them, as they told them, as they shared them. And based on the feedback they give when you share those with those writings or those transcriptions with them, that is how you put them or work them into the storying process. In the development of the stories, I have, particularly with the study on sexual harassment, after sharing with them and after them providing the feedback, I have worked into digital storytelling as a way of sharing those experiences beyond the focus. It looks like I went on for a bit. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Where did I go off?
It just about 20 seconds only.
Oh, okay. So let me go back to sharing. Is it in presentation mode? Great. I'm not sure. So I think I was talking about the digital storying when I went off. Is that okay? Great. Thank you. So I've had that because I'm going to have conversations with the students and to share these, basically a form of educating the students. I worked within this process, the digital storytelling, and I'll share one of those with you in a few minutes. That is, if my time allows me to do so. I think I have already explained the core meaning making process. And so what are the implications of using this framework in any kind of study? I think that mainly at the beginning or the helm of it is the epistemic equity, where we're saying that ways of knowing that are not white or that are not imperialist can also bring meaning, can also impact knowledge and has value in the ways in which we understand ourselves as a people. And therefore, by using such frameworks, we are centering new ways, alternative ways of thinking, alternative ways of understanding the world that we live in. Again, if we're using this framework within the educational space, then we are transforming the ways in which we understand even schooling. Because within the traditional African spaces, the communal, the fireside chat, the community spaces were spaces for learning. Apprenticeship or staying within the community and learning was very, very important. So by bringing such conversations in, we're expanding the ways in which we understand knowledge and how it is shared, and who owns the knowledge that is shared in the first place. Again, if we're applying this framework within the space of governance, then policies, frameworks, and the ways in which we think, and particularly because of the study on sexual harassment, having these conversations in conjunction with policymakers, in conjunction with the code of conduct that has been designed designed or developed for the teachers in the school, as compared to students' code of conduct and teachers' code of conduct, and how that has an impact on the teachers when they are what they do within the school space. And so by approaching it from this communal space, such conversations make room to hear perspectives, and therefore what comes out is more collaborative. It's more of a community guided way of living. And of course, if we're centering people's ways of understanding themselves, then your research is relevant and applicable to the community that is being talked about. So here is a brief, and I know this is not the main focus of the presentation, but I'm sharing how the digital stories also help in the storying process. That is, if you want to. Can you hear the sound, please?
Yes.
Akara, akara, akara.
This is not the one I wanted to share. Let's skip it. Oh, and a disclaimer here, there might be some graphic pictures because this is about sexual harassment, so please keep that in mind for your sensibilities. Sorry.
I was with my head of department. I was discussing some of these issues with her. I went to one of the classrooms where the boys were very quiet in the class. So as soon as I entered the class, I said, "Wow, there is no teacher in the class and you all are studying. You've done so well." And I realized that one boy was just by the whiteboard working mathematics for the other friends to learn. Then I said, "You've done so well. I am going to let you be my daughter's husband in future." They said, "Hey!" The boys were saying, "Hey!" The ones sitting behind, they were giving him funds because I said I'm going to give my daughter to him. I was there when one day, this gentleman came to me and said, "Madam, can I get your number? I want to talk to your daughter." "Okay, no problem," I said. So I gave my number out. In my mind's eye, because I knew where I was coming from, I told myself this boy is a good boy. And I have some of the girls in my neighborhood who are very good. So as time goes on, we could have this network and then gradually it goes on. I was there. This boy will send me messages.
Is your daughter at home?
"No, she's gone to school," I said. That's what I said to just avoid moving forward. Then, from time to time, he will send, "Madam, when will I see her?" "I will invite you to the house to see her very soon," I said. Out of the blue, I was there and then, to be honest, I was shocked. He posted me his manhood.
Hey! You've told me this before. And he sent it to you.
He took a snapshot of his manhood. So quickly, I sent him a message. "Where from this? Why? I told you I'll give you my daughter. But why have you posted me your manhood? You were in Form 1 here. We taught you religious and moral education. So why this picture?" So quickly, he didn't reply. So I called. And that is where I started with the counseling. Then he said, when he's there, he cannot control himself. Not knowing he's been watching pornography. You've been watching pornography. So that's where I started talking to him. I started telling him that the more he keeps on watching, the more it's going to create pictures in his mental eye, and then the more he will practice. And because he wants to practice, that's why quickly he has forgotten about who he is communicating with, and he sent me this picture. And when I did that, he felt very bad, and up to now he hasn't communicated with me again. Now, I have my peace because he always wanted to talk to my daughter. But what he sent me was something that I was disappointed.
All right. So ultimately, what am I saying with this process? But we can have a conversation about that short video as well. That this framework could lead to a more localized and sustainable and holistic approach to development across sectors of the continent when we center our ways of knowing, our philosophies, our perspectives, and our culture and our languages within the research process. It would also encourage African researchers and scholars to look inward for solutions while also contributing to global discussions on knowledge and its development as a whole. And ultimately, I'm hoping that this conversation and such methodologies and approaches should encourage other indigenous and marginalized communities within the academia or epistemic spaces to center their ways of knowing and understanding their own experiences for relevant impact. And I end with this short poem. To find ourselves, we must look back with eyes of our people, our ancestors, our present, and our future. The future is clearer when the past is understood. The present is better when what is indigenous is indigenized. Knowledge that is innate can only transform. As we look back in forging new paths, know and understand what you bring with you to the future. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Araba, for the interesting and informative topic about the fireside chat approach to story gathering in the African oral traditional storytelling framework. This one is very interesting to me because, I am married to an African that I don't know really much of about, story about how you really communicate storytelling. Okay. So this time, may I request everyone, our audience, to write your questions through chat with your name and where you're from, or you may write the institution you are affiliated with or the country. So for our first question, since this is really contextual to an African, yeah. So how does the fireside chat approach within the AOTS framework challenge conventional or Western-centered research methods? Because that's what we all know, and that's what are the available to us. So how does it challenge?
So in writing out the framework, I talked, or in the presentation earlier, I talked about the kind of relationship building that occurs within the fireside chat space. Now, in writing about the framework, I said this is more of an ethnographic kind of way to understanding people's experiences than it is just going into a space and asking for information. Again, beyond the concept of just going in and asking for the relationship building, we're talking about centering the ways in which culturally we understand or come to knowledge or come to meaning making. So even though focus groups, in the research context that we all know, or frameworks that we know, seem to adhere in that space, the kind of power structure that we find in research kind of space, it doesn't happen within the fireside chat space. Because in that space, we are all one, we're all together working towards a common goal. So before you get to that fireside chat space, if you don't have that relationship built, you are back to the regular research context that we use, which is the Western-centered ways, either researchy context or even with focus group. I have a series of questions. I have come to your community and I'm asking for my answers. When you give me the answers, and I go and I do whatever I want with them. But within the fireside chat space, it is myself, yes, the researcher, but the community together working towards what meaning is or what those experiences mean and the interpretations that come out of it. So I think that that's the biggest part that is different. Again, in the ways in which the collaborators understand or share their experiences, we have cultural, linguistic, and perspectives that are embedded that you would not necessarily find within the regular, quote unquote, regular, I should say, research approaches.
Okay, so it seems like, okay, so you're rooted in a research design of ethnographic where you have to dwell with them, yeah?
You have to be with them, and the relationship doesn't end after you finish. So my teachers, my collaborators who share these experiences, I'm still in some kind of conversations with them. I check in, I see how school is going, and of course, share some of the impacts that I'm making with the information that they have shared with me.
Thank you so much. And we have one question from our audience from Mabel Bortier. Mabel is a Ghanaian, okay, currently living in Liberia. I'm wondering how I can use this fire chat framework to investigate sexual harassment of students by their teachers, especially with the power dynamics that exist between teachers and students. Yeah. Wow. It's very sensitive.
Yes. Thank you so much for the question. This is a very good question. And I think I shared a bit about how I did mine with the teachers, and it will be a similar approach with the students. Again, because you may be, and I don't know how old you are, but I'm basing because of the conversation, I'm going to assume you're older and you're going into a space with younger people. Your concept or your role of trust building has to be very well coordinated and very well planned. You have to find a way to be a part of them in order to begin to share those experiences, especially because you are in position of authority. You have to find a way to level with them. And I think that for the using the AOTS framework, that is the biggest thing that you have to focus on. When you get that out of the way, everything else falls in place. They are comfortable sharing, and sometimes they share things that they are not supposed to share with you in the first place because it's not because of that relationship building. So if you intend to do this kind of research, and I'm happy to have conversations about this because following from the study that I did with the teachers, they have told me that the students are also navigating such experiences, and not necessarily from teachers alone, but from their own mates as well. And so I'm trying to go back into that community for such conversations. So I'm happy to share notes and compare notes and ideas as well. I hope this helps.
Thank you so much, Dr. Araba, for that answer. And, you know, we already know about some ethical considerations, right, in qualitative research.
Right.
Aside from the conventional ethical considerations of confidentiality, anonymity, what else should we really consider that you don't see commonly from the other qualitative research? Or because storytelling is also narrative research, right? So
right.
What do you think? Yeah.
Right. So in terms of ethics, particularly around consent, right? For my dissertation, for instance, I had to go ahead and have them sign, right? But for my collaborators, consent was within the conversation process, that I am happy to share these experiences with you. And sometimes consent comes in, and I had in like food. So my first fireside chat with my teachers, we were not even in the school environment. We went into a restaurant where we had a room to ourselves, where we shared food, we broke bread, And so consent, as we know it, you have to sign or thumbprint or show that I have consented, does not necessarily work within the old framework that way. You have to look at what consent looks like within that particular cultural space. So within the Philippines, what does consent look like? How does the traditional Filipino or I don't know if you do Filipino as well, but what would they, right? What does consent look like, right? What does consent look like in that space? In terms of them being comfortable sharing their experiences, it all depends on who is in that space, right? And if they agree that they are comfortable with each other to share their experiences. There are times where I've had to have a conversation or a fireside chat with someone alone because they do not feel that they belong to that group. And that is okay. So, and that is where we build the ethics in, because then they are comfortable sharing their experiences with other people in the space. If they are not, then you would have to do maybe a more of a collaborative or two people fireside chat. But then if they are comfortable, so those are the things that we have to look out for within the fireside chat space. I think I've covered all of it. Is there something? Yeah. It's something
Thank you
if I
so
remember.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Another question from Josiah Serembimbi. I am a teenager from Angola. As a young person who wants to make a difference, how can qualitative research help youth like me understand and solve real problems in our communities and contribute to the growth of our country? So maybe you talk about how fireside chat approach can help him
Right.
with the solve real problems. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for being here. So, like I said, if you're looking at your cultural space, right, stories have a way of unearthing experiences and thoughts and ideas that people have. So, in order to make change, you have to bring your community along with you. You cannot do this by yourself. And I think that within the Western academic spaces that we've come, we like to do things by ourselves. It is me, it is my research, it is my publication, it is my knowledge, and therefore I'm sharing it and I'm the one who holds it. No. Within this framework, within the OATS framework and within the Fireside Chat, we're saying that knowledge is communal, that together our knowledge goes far. Together we bring about change. So I know you will be the lead in the change process, but you would have to work with your community. Have a conversation around what is going on in our community. What is wrong with our society? What are the challenges that we are facing as a society? And then together come up with ways in which you can solve those problems. So if you're looking at experiences or storytelling, look at the stories that are not told, particularly the stories that are hidden, the people within the community who do not have the voices. Those are the ones you go to. Those are the stories that you share, and those are the stories you highlight to bring about the change that you need.
Wow, I would like to follow up on that. Because the topics that you have chosen and we are discussing it, they are very sensitive topics. Were there times when your participant would not really talk about it or refuse even, okay, the consent form has already given, okay, I will participate in your study, and then as the conversation went through, were there times that that person doesn't want to or didn't want to tell anymore about it because it's hurting? Yeah,
Yes.
it's like you're digging the past. So how can you tell us your experience about this?
And I would say that this was a shock for me. Interestingly, no, I did not have any of the teachers who were unwilling. I mean, there were schools that I went to and they were not willing to talk to me at all. So that didn't even happen in the first place. They said no outrightly. Even though they had shared some experiences and even though they filled out an initial interest in me coming to have a conversation with them, they said no. they were no longer interested in going. But for those who agreed and have been in the Fireside chat with me, I didn't have anyone come back later on to say that no, I am not interested in sharing or I'm unwilling to share. In fact, I had one collaborator who brought out her phone to even show me some of the text messages that students had sent about her body, about how she dresses, about the way she looks, and all of that, right? Um, and I think ultimately that it is that relationship building. I think that that is where the core is, that they know that they are in safe hands. I also have to say, though, that I had within my consent notes so that I let them know I had a therapist, a psychologist available to them. And so if they needed to have that conversation, they could do that. The other thing I noticed through this process, which was interesting for me, was they didn't, they laughed about it, right? It was funny. It was, their response is, oh, these are young people. We have to guide them. We have to train them. We have to, teach them to do the right things, to behave the right way, to think the right way. And that for me was a bit problematic because it's harassment and it's against the law. But the way they approach it, and because they're female, that motherly, I am a mother, and these are young boys. They just need guidance. They've lost their way, so this is not something that leads them into being arrested or being punished or losing the education or stuff like that. But then we, because of that conversations, we even had conversations around, okay, but if we let them go now, then they go to the universities. Then they are raping, abusing, either they're even lecturers or their fellow students within that space. And I think that it grows from here. So how do we mold? And so I think that to answer your question, no, I didn't get to that point, and I'm sure that's something that I might experience when I get to the students, because these are a bit more delicate in terms of the maturity, and so that is something that I have to navigate. But I didn't really have that in this phase.
Thank you so much. And for the last question from Dr. Safari from QLRC, USA. Excellent presentation on indigenous methodology, Dr. Araba. Given that qualitative research is still at its infancy in most parts of Africa, how are indigenous methodologies welcome in the scholarly communities?
So I I will share this experience. So there was a call for a special issue, and I'll mention the journal. And then I submitted a proposal, and they were interested, right? And note that because of the nature of the OATS framework, there are lots of storytelling. And so I do the write-up, and then I share with them. And I can tell you there was a lot of back and forth on that paper. We don't understand what you're doing. And why is the story here? What does this mean? What is this doing here? And so we lots of back and forth, and I pushed back as far as I can push back. And then we came to a point where I had to explain every single thing that I was doing in the story process. And then there was a comment from one of the reviewers stating that how is this legitimate? Is this a legitimate? And I said, well, this framework is published in Qualitative Research Journal, and it is unaccepted. And therefore, I don't know what you mean by legitimacy, because if you want to hear the voices of the people that I am sharing with you, then this is how they want their experiences shared. It got to a point I was like, well, this is how it should look like. I have compromised enough to this point. If it's not going to look like that, and it's not going to present the voices the way they ought to be presented, then I don't think that this is the space for my collaborators' experiences to be shared. And that they went back and forth, but finally it is published, and it has been published, and then it is out there. I won't mention the journal, I won't talk about the papers, but yeah, I think that we have to make our voices heard. We have to push back on some of these. We treat it as what's the word they usually use? The word isn't coming. There's a word. I don't know if Dr. Safari, I see your hand is up. I'm not sure if it's because you want to provide me with a word. Is it robust? Right? They're trying to say it's this robust research methodology. They use all that, that kind of phrasing to make it seem like you didn't do your due diligence, or because you are not using theories from this perspective to explain those experiences, then they are not valid. No, I think that we have to make our voices heard, because in our story sharing, we don't use theories. We use our cultural perspectives, and that are embedded in the ways in which we understand ourselves.
Please allow me to jump and I just
Yes.
cannot control myself. This is just too exciting. I mean, this is a gem. This presentation is a gem, and I wish we would have even the whole day just to listen to this. It's just phenomenal.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to add to that, and I'm glad how you handle that, because I have faced that, I have seen that. We should not be apologetic for qualitative research. That time is long gone. That was maybe 25 years ago and before that. We had to be, I did not interview enough people. I said, no, because
No.
that's a completely different perspective. That's not the assumptions, the fundamental assumptions of qualitative research. And so we cannot be apologetic for other people's ignorance of qualitative research, just like they don't have to be apologetic for my ignorance of advanced statistics. They don't
That's
have
right.
to be apologetic to that. And so we have to defend what we know is right. And I'm big with about advocacy, although I have not probably done a whole lot of as much as I wanted to do. This is part of advocacy for our participants. When we want to say, okay, listen, if you do not want to publish this, then I'm willing to take it somewhere else, because I'm not going to try to go against the rigor of qualitative research, and in this case, indigenous methodology.
That's the word, rigor.
Yes, to accommodate your ignorance. I mean, I won't say it like that, but basically, I'm willing to take it where people know what they're doing, instead of me going against the rigor of my methodology to accommodate your ignorance. So kudos to an excellent job, both in the presentation and the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, they're looking for theory. That's why you're doing it, to make a theory in the context of African, indigenous. Yeah, we also have like that fight with our Filipino, indigenous theories. Okay. Oh, there's one. Okay, so yes, we have to come to an end. Yeah, unfortunately. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Araba, for that. Oh man, phenomenal. Yes, very interesting. Thank you for generously sharing your expertise with us today. And we also extend our heartfelt appreciation to all our webinar participants. Your presence and engagement made this session a success. So our recording for today's webinar will be available on our website, www.qlrconnect.com, within the next 48 hours. So for your certificate of attendance, it is only given to registered QLRC members. To claim it, the member must send the request to info@qlrconnect.com and attach a screenshot. Oh, don't forget, if you forgot the screenshot, do it now, of oneself, yourself, together with us, showing attendance to the webinar. And if you would like to officially become part of Qualitative Research Connect community, we warmly invite you to visit our website and complete the membership form. Okay, so thank you so much. And finally, for the last webinar of this year, 2025, that will be on December 4, featuring the topic, fostering a qualitative research culture in a higher education institution. Thank you once again, and mabuhay. Merry Christmas, everyone, from the Philippines.
Thank you so much, Medase.